On the eve of Austrian Grand Prix, a resolution to the issue of how inflation affects the Formula One cost cap was finally reached after months of debate. Fans' confusion at the protracted drama of team owners quarreling over a few $1 million here and there would be understandable. After all, the focus of this sport should be on the competition between skilled drivers and the engineers who created and managed their vehicles on the racetrack. It was never intended to be an accounting competition. We must, however, keep the big picture in mind, due in large part of the cost limitation, which limits overall spending and holds the major players in check. F1 is now in good shape. The last couple of years could have seen the loss of more than one team if it hadn't been introduced. Investors have instead been rushing to get into the sport. F1 is considered to be too inexpensive, according to Fred Vasseur of Alfa Romeo. In my opinion, this one is entirely incorrect because I believe that F1 is in a terrific position thanks to the cost cap. Therefore, it must be acknowledged that breaking F1's financial restrictions now carries the same consequences as breaking those of the sport and technology. The lag in time is the primary defense, the results of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and consequently, the 2022 World Championship should be established on the evening of November 20, at least in terms of sporting and technical concerns, presuming nothing untoward occurs on the circuit or in Parc Ferme. But it won't be until well into 2023 that the season's final financial figures will be calculated. Theoretically, a violation could result in a retroactive punishment that affects the current World Championship, and, if the offending team disagrees with the ruling, could lead to a protracted legal battle. In terms of a big postseason shift to the season's outcome, F1 history only has one example. Michael Schumacher lost his second-place finish in the World Championship as a result of his controversial collision with Jacques Villeneuve in the 1997 European Grand Prix in Jerez. But this punishment was significantly less severe than if he had actually lost the title. A late winner change is common in other sports, though. A drug cheat has been discovered after the fact at prominent events like the Olympic Games and Tour de France. So why not in Formula One as well, if a team cheats with its spending? It was obvious that some teams would have gone over the limit and faced penalties if the F1 Commission had not approved the increase to the initial cost ceiling figure. Although only 3.1%, the rise has allowed the teams some breathing room as they work to control their spending. They now have some leeway, albeit it remains to be seen if they can all keep inside the new limit. The baseline cost cap for 2022 was $140.0 million, and an additional $1.2 million was added for the 22nd race, for a total of $141.2 million, due in large part to rising utility bills and other costs due to inflation, as well as an increase in freight costs globally. That is the amount that some teams conceded to the FIA they would not be able to meet. The important factor was how much they would miss that goal. According to the FIA financial laws, a 5% excess is considered a small overspend. If it is less than that amount, a substantial overspend is when the goal is missed by more than 5%. The difference is that the FIA's cost cap adjudication panel's list of potential sanctions for the latter is far more severe and includes banning the offending team from the World Championship. The increase in inflation of 3.1% amounts to almost $4.3 million, bringing the revised target total of $145.5 million. The new 5% cutoff for a major violation starts to apply above that at about $152.7 million. The word compromise was always used in discussions in the F1 Commission's findings in Austria, and it was obvious that the high-spending teams wanted more and the lower-spending teams wanted less. Andreas Seidel, whose McLaren team was anticipating breaking the original cap, albeit not as much as other rivals, said, "Obviously, in the different places have been fairly far apart from no change to substantial adjustments. We eventually came together in the middle. That is why it is referred to as a compromise." We were pleased with that as well because, like Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, and other teams, we had similar problems that had voted for a raise. And now that we have a clearly defined solution, especially for 22, we are quite satisfied. I believe that what is currently in place is absolutely sensible, because in the end, it's the best interest of the sport that we have a defined solution for this year and don't end up with several teams breaching the cap in only the second year of it being in place, due to very special circumstances, the commentator said. Even though it was obvious that they all desired a higher number, the three biggest spenders welcomed the increase of 3.1%. Because we made a decision, it was good, according to Mattia Binotto of Ferrari, because we talked a lot during the previous F1 commission, but no decisions were made. We were really on the edge in terms of time, in my opinion. This year, some teams had already exceeded the financial limit, thus a compromise was necessary. As a large team, you are undoubtedly always seeking more, but I believe that this compromise is sufficient to offer us a task, a new objective and a fresh challenge. Yes, it'll be difficult, but it'll be good that we make a choice. Red Bull's Christian Horner responded, "Of course, it helps. I believe that in an effort to reach a compromise, it was either too much for a few clubs or insufficient for the top teams. Therefore, establishing a middle ground was necessary, and it's not just this year. It's also about the year after that and the years after that. Therefore, in my opinion, that was the right thing to do." Toto Wolff was arguably the least enthused of the big three teams' managers. The Austrian responded, "I guess too little for the big teams because of the growing costs of energy, inflation, and freight. Too much perhaps for the little teams, so nobody's really happy, which I suppose is a decent result. I believe that the reason we were able to reach a settlement was that we told the smaller teams that we wouldn't be returning and that we need to engage in some sort of discussion with the cost cap adjudication panel. I believe that the three of us are far above it, and Mercedes will need to cut costs as a result. So yes, the result is beneficial. Does it make our issues go away? No." Wolff's acknowledgement that Mercedes will find it difficult to reach the new restriction was quite candid. One could assume that any team that exceeds the revised headline total while using the 3.1% inflation incentive is looking for trouble, even if they just go over budget by a small amount. There used to be a certain level of safety in numbers. Up to 7 teams were predicted to exceed the initial cap, and it was implied that any substantial penalties imposed in the middle of 2023 that were disturbed among the many teams would be absurd and make a mockery of the game. Now, would the CCAP actually agree to that? The authorities might not be sympathetic if only 1 or 2 teams exceed the new limit, while the other teams play the game and demonstrate that it is possible to stay under. That is the risk that the major players currently run. As we conclude the video, I would say that the cost cap is a welcome addition to F1 and is making things better. But if you were to listen to the teams, particularly Mr. Horner, you might think that teams wouldn't even show up for the races. This is untrue, and it was never a choice. These events are more than simply races. They are chances to court sponsors, media opportunities, and merchandise sales. All things that teams need to survive in the first place. So by skipping them, they're essentially doing themselves harm. Instead of turning off the wind tunnel, the teams who would break the laws really just want to keep improving and offering new things. I'm not happy about job losses, but they are a reality. The cost cap was implemented to prevent enormous expenditures and ensure that all teams compete on a fair playing field. If I could change one thing, I would exclude transportation charges from the cost cap. It has no positive effect on performance. This would remove one justification for teams citing increased expenses, and instead focus solely on staff, R&D, manufacturing, performance, and etc. Let us know your opinion in the comments section, and thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and press the bell symbol to receive notifications of upcoming uploads.